The judge today going farther than ever, warning defendant Donald Trump that he can be jailed if there are more gag order violations. Let me show you exactly what happened. You may have heard about it, but we're going to walk through it specifically. The judge telling Trump today that he can face a, quote, jail sanction. That is the big key part, which is why we put it in big letters. Jail sanction for defendant Trump if he repeats these gag order violations. Judge Merchan drawing a line and directly noting why this is a big deal with the repeated violations of the gag order. Now, other defendants have been jailed for less. You probably heard about that. But on the other hand, let's be clear. Defendant Trump has not been convicted in this case. And there are practical issues around the unprecedented prospect of jailing an ex-president and current candidate for the White House. They are heavy issues. So the judge did not pretend this is just like any other case today. What he did is interesting and could be concerning for defendant Trump. The judge bluntly addressing those facts that exist outside of court. And maybe he's trying to evince a type of fairness or awareness as a judge in case this ever gets to the point of jailing Trump. That would come up again later if Trump keeps pushing it and winds up in jail during this trial. Here's what the judge stressed today to defendant Trump. Quote, the last thing I want to do is to put you in jail. You are the former president of the United States and possibly the next president as well. That is not only judicious, to use a word that applies here, it's downright friendly. I'm sure of all the things that we've witnessed Donald Trump go through as a defendant in this case, and I've been in that courtroom, as have all of our peers and colleagues as we cover it, that's one of the nicest things anyone in power has mentioned to him. You might be president again, in all fairness. It's the most direct the judge has been on this point. And the reason is that Donald Trump's brazen violations of this gag order, which is designed to protect the fairness of the trial, is now at the center of the decisions the judge may make. And I want to be clear when we get to the actual violations. We're not talking about one or two close calls. This court has found Trump broke the gag order 10 times after warnings. He's landed himself in contempt again. He has made attacks on the jury here of civilians, the people who are, of course, not only supposed to be protected, but who will rule on his fate as a defendant. Now, the judge has began this process moderately. There were the small fines you might have heard about, $1,000 per. But today, again, in what I'm telling you was a big part of the developments, the judge tells Trump, quote, the $1,000 fines are not serving as a deterrent. And even though he does not want to propose a jail sanction, I will, the judge told defendant Trump, if necessary and appropriate. So that is pressure on the defendant. The judge's written order puts it quite formally, and I want to share that with you as well, because that's the kind of thing that would also be reviewed if Trump winds up in jail and we're covering the appeals process for this. He says, as you see here, quote, the defendant is hereby put on notice that future violations can be, quote, punishable by incarceration. That's big. So, okay, I showed you exactly what was said in court. I showed you how it was written. Now what? Well, this order is another step towards possibly jailing Trump. If he starts complying more, then nothing else happens. If he breaks the order again, the judge can back down and reasoning it's more important to just finish the trial. Or he could order to put in place the jailing of defendant Trump. Could be for hours, could be one night or longer. And by the way, one reason people are jailed for this is once you are in jail, behind bars, it's impossible to violate a gag order from there. There are strict rules on what you can do, what you can interact with, right? You're in the jail. You might have access to a lawyer, for example. The lawyer is not going to help you violate the gag order. Your freedom of movement, your freedom of communication, everything is restricted even more. So that's one reason you jail people if they keep violating gag orders, especially if they're attacking the judge's family or the jury. But to play this out, if Trump were jailed or ordered to be jailed, it would be unprecedented. There would certainly be appeals. And the courts could pause that order. They would look to the judge's response today. They would assess whether it was measured. Did he jump into this? Did he immediately try to jail the defendant? Did it look somehow rushed or unjust? And that may be, again, why this judge is moving this way, because he can show it took 10 plus violations and written notice and another violation to get there if we were to get there. Now, after the judge issued this warning today, which I'm telling you was a big deal in the court today, Trump was initially more quiet than usual when he left the hearing room.
Mr. Trump, any jury? Any comment on the fine?
Mr. Trump, what do you think of the gag order?
Mr. President, how's the defense team doing?
Well, that is a process, and that's part of this, and it's not just a court thing. When you see candidates, nominees, or the president himself or former presidents, you have barriers, you have reporters who shout questions. Trump has availed himself at that spot or near there many times of answering. What you saw there was twice him passing on the chance. But here's the thing about a trial or most news. The story keeps going. So what might have looked a little quiet in those first hours after the judge's warning today turned to Donald Trump, the defendant, complaining about that very jail warning. And again, I want to give you the context here. We're going to show this because it's his response in the case. And it goes further than him walking by with the thumbs up, although you'll note these remarks do not actually attack the jury again or seem to violate the order.
This judge has given me a gag order and said you'll go to jail if you violate it. And frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
Donald Trump proclaims himself ready to do that personal sacrifice any day. And I want to be clear with you, legally and otherwise, both in the context of this trial and just him running for president right now, he has every right to talk that way, to describe himself how he wants. But as for the claim there, I can tell you factually, Donald Trump has rarely taken personal legal sacrifices in the many different cases and probes that have ensnared him and others. He often lets even his former close aides get in trouble, get subpoenaed, pay big legal bills, or even go to jail, and he's generally sat out those big fights. We covered one with his former aide, Peter Navarro, where for months Donald Trump wouldn't even sign a piece of paper affirming Navarro's defense that he had invoked a type of privilege which didn't apply, but whether he tried to invoke it for Navarro. My point being that was not much of a sacrifice, and he didn't do that. But again, he has the right to say that. As for the political messaging here, which is part of this and why this is just such a different type of situation, Trump is leaning into a point that his own allies have been pushing about any potential jailing for gag order violations.
They are threatening to throw the Republican nominee for president in jail for talking, Harris, for talking during an election. Now, I'm not a lawyer, just play one on TV, but according to the gag, you could have the Loch Ness Monster as a juror, and Trump can't say the Loch Ness Monster is real. That's $1,000. Boom, right there.
It's hard to fully follow what's being asserted. I am a lawyer. I also sort of play one on TV, or at least do legal reporting. And again, it's important to understand that while this is not a light, easy call for any judge, this exact situation, it's not jailing for talking. This defendant talks plenty. People know that. He posts plenty, and he can speak about many different aspects of this, including even criticize the judge and the DA. What he cannot do is attack the jury, intimidate the people who are going to be ruling on his fate, or otherwise undermine this process. And think about it. If you could get away with that too easily and too much, we wouldn't have very fair court processes. And the New York courts have run into this before. John Gotti was accused of witness tampering because he saw his route to getting through a trial is tampering with, messing with the witnesses and the jury. That's the clash, though, over the defendant's actions today. As for what went down in court today was much more technical than, say, Friday, where we heard from Hope Hicks, the Trump aide. Today, prosecutors wanted to use evidence and receipts to do something for the jury, a very familiar kind of argument. They wanted to show a way of looking at this whole history, what a different set of investigators in the Nixon era famously called follow the money.
Follow the money. What do you mean? Where? Oh, I can't tell you that. Just follow the money.
Just follow the money. Well, with better lighting and fewer shadows, that's what the prosecutors tried to do today. They showed the jury the money at the heart of this case, Trump paying for silence through reimbursements. The jury got paper evidence that they could review of that process, like what you see here, a bank statement of the original $130,000 from late October 16 that went to Stormy Daniels, a handwritten note from a top Trump CFO who's currently back in Rikers jail, by the way, Alan Weisselberg, saying you'd have to gross it up to $420K. That is the kind of handwritten note of at least basic tax fraud that you usually don't want to do, let alone write down. He's in Rikers and can think about that. The jury also saw the checks, 9 signed by Trump himself. We've known about this plot for some time. Still, though, the jury is seeing it in black and white. Prosecutors also brought to the stand 2 insiders at that company, Trump Org, who confirmed the money came from Donald Trump himself from his personal bank account. And they also saw an interesting little detail that they had to then send stuff to the White House, the paperwork, the checks, so they could be signed by the president. And because he was recently elected, that was a, quote, whole new process, as one recounted. So that's what happened today. Honestly, you never know what's going to happen in a trial. You don't know exactly who the witnesses are going to be. You didn't know Hope Hicks was going to have such an emotional day on Friday. You didn't know today was going to be so dry and it's sometimes really financially boring. And yet weighed against that was something that the jury didn't see, but we get to see. Remember, we're going to see a lot of things the jury can't see, which was just how close to the jailing line this defendant seems to be getting.